Guys, again, welcome to today's class. As you might be aware, today's topic is blues soloing basics. So we're pretty excited about this. This is a very important topic, I feel, for guitar in general. Like a lot of guitar playing has a lot to do with blues and how to improvise and make it sound like very stylistic from the blues tradition. So this will be very fun. Before we dive any further, I just wanted to first encourage you to participate in the class. So if you have any questions, comments, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom, open your mic, or leave your questions in the chat. And that goes for the people on YouTube as well. We'll be checking the YouTube chat. So if you have any questions or comments you would like to discuss, please leave them there, and we'll be very happy to just engage with you guys. With that said, also, in case you're interested into joining or knowing more about the GuitarZoom Academy, please check the link we're gonna leave on the chats. We'll be very glad to talk with you guys to see what are your goals, what's your process so far, and to have a more detailed conversation about how our academy works and to see if this is the right fit for you. So yeah, I'm leaving that link in the chat as well.
I'm gonna leave it in the YouTube chat.
Awesome.
Thank you. There we go.
Awesome. With that in mind, let's get started. How are you today, Victor?
Not bad, not bad. Got a headache though, but other than that, it's all fine.
Okay. Let's hope it doesn't get any worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Victor, what's blues for you?
Well, blues is a kind of a folk music that diverges from the folklore. Okay? But we have to keep, we have to stay, so to say, to pay respect to it when playing it, okay? Because when you go too much making it original and fresh and new, you can go too much outside of it and not sound bluesy anymore, okay? So we have to be very careful with that. But also to stay original enough so as not to be boring when playing the blues. I hope that makes sense to you all, okay? Now, when we talk about blues soloing, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, the pentatonic scale, and mostly the minor pentatonic scale, especially when you start out with the blues. Now, the trick is how not to get stuck playing in the pentatonic boxes, okay? And that's what we're gonna talk about today. Juan?
Yep, I agree. That's a great question on how to not get stuck on those pentatonic boxes. I feel this is like a bell curve. Well, what we're talking about, like you start playing and you start to learn the pentatonic, you start to get like more familiar with it and get stuck. So you get like to this high point of where do I go from there, and you start to learn other stuff. And after learning that other stuff, you come back to the pentatonic, but like very willingly. So at least that's what happened to me when coming to blues. Like I got into pentatonic chord changes, chord chasing, highlighting the harmony, and I came back to pentatonic licks, but with more confidence and more just taste and liking to it. So yeah, I mentioned a concept that or at least I'm gonna dive a little deeper in a second, and it's chord chasing. But initially, let's study a little bit about the pentatonic. So the pentatonic scale basically is a scale that has 5 notes. A scale is a set of notes played in a succession. Before we move on, let me know, guys, if you can hear my guitar. Does that sound at a good level?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, with that in mind, the pentatonic, you guys might know it, at least the one that people usually learn is either the A minor pentatonic or the E minor pentatonic. For now, I want to work on the A minor one. So in case anyone does not know what I'm talking about, it's a scale that has 5 notes. Those 5 notes on the fretboard will be A, C, D, E, and G. I'll do a graphic of that on the fretboard in a second to see how that looks like. But yeah, those are the notes that we play, and they're just repeated over and over. A, C, D, E, G, A, C, and so on. On every position you might find them, you will be playing the same set of notes. I feel the pentatonic has a very specific sound to it. Like it just by default has that bluesy sound on its own. So even if you just start tweaking around with the notes, exactly. I just don't know how to describe that, but it has that bluesy feel just by default. With that said, we're talking about soloing, and I feel that has a lot to do with improvising and just getting your own ideas on that specific moment you're playing. Here are a couple of ideas that I have for starters, in case you haven't improvised ever, or want to get into it, or are already trying stuff out but don't know what to do exactly with the scale. So initially, again, I'm gonna draw a graphic of the scale in a second, so we have a clearer image of that. But let's say that you already know scale position. You already know this set of notes on the fretboard. One idea that I have for starting to improvise is to play with your phrasing. That means, same as in language, in music a phrase is an idea that has a start and an end. See how I paused there to make it obvious that I ended something? So the same thing happens on music. If you have a set of notes and you stop, it's very clear that an idea ended right there. So right away, you can start just playing the notes of the scale up and down, but try stopping at random places. Look, right now, I'm not even thinking of any time signature, any chord, any harmony. I'm just trying to think of melodies with the notes I have over here. Right? I can just play notes of the scale that are together, and that on its own will help me building melodies. So that's an idea I have for you to start playing around with just stopping with your phrases. You can, on this same principle, you can play with how long or short is your phrase gonna be. Look, this is a very long phrase. Another one. Or you can make shorter phrases. Right? Very few notes. So that's an idea you can play with, the length of your phrases and just stopping at any random note of the scale. Sorry. Right? We can stop at any given place. Those are some ideas for starters. You can implement this over a drum track, over a metronome, whatever you're practicing over, or just on your own, as I'm doing. I'm just playing around and trying to find melodies on the scale. So I feel that's a good starting point, not only to get your creativity going, but also just to get used to the sound of the scale. When practicing and playing melodies on it, you just start to interiorize a little better the notes that you're playing with. So that's an idea that I would say for starters. Now, another one on the same note is we were playing with movement either up or down on the scale, right? Either going like this or going the other way, right? But we can also zigzag in between the same phrase. Right there, I tried to change the direction of my melodic movement here and there just randomly. Try it slowly. Start to play the scale up and down. Change direction whenever you feel like. That can help you build longer phrases if you already went out of notes. If you already played the whole thing up and down, you can just shift directions and that can prolong your phrase. So those are some ideas for starters. Look, I'm gonna play on my own, no rhythm track, no chords, anything. I'm just gonna build a couple of phrases thinking of those principles we just mentioned. So for instance, short phrases. Longer phrases. Zigzagging. Short phrase. Right? With those principles, I'm already building melodies and trying to give life to that set of notes that I'm playing with. So those are some ideas that I can give you to just start sparking out your creativity. Victor, do you have maybe any comments or ideas there to add?
Yeah, next step, I suppose, would be how to make it speak, okay? Because playing the blues is all about soulful, beautiful playing, right? Or sometimes nasty, but soulful, okay? So the thing is how to put some embellishments to these melodies that you create so as not to not to sound dull and too robotic, okay? And us guitar players, we have quite a few different tools that we can use stylistically to make it sound beautiful, okay? To simplify it. So, first thing you can think about when we're talking about the blues, bendings. The most important thing. You cannot play the blues without, okay? That's one of the most important movements when playing the blues, okay? Next thing, slides, hammer-ons and pull-offs, all of the techniques that us guitar players can do that some other musicians cannot do on their instrument, okay? That is one very important thing to think about. And next thing
Yeah,
is how you approach the scale. Try to get out of playing scale-wise, up and down, playing every next note of the scale as your next go-to note, okay? Try to do some jumps here and there. Sorry, Juan, I interrupted you.
No, no worries. That's something to expand on in a second about like sliding, vibrato, bending. So keep going.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. So, for instance, what I said last, when thinking about how to sound not too scaly, not too much like you're practicing a scale, but as playing music instead, is when practicing, try to hear some melodies in your scale practice, okay? What I mean by this is the following. If you take your A minor pentatonic scale, of course, when you're practicing, you're probably playing the scale up and down, and you will very rarely use this particular movement as a lick when playing. Yes, you can do that, okay? But if you just get stuck with playing the scale up and down, it will become boring eventually, actually sooner than you think. So, how you can approach your practicing, take the scale and try to flip some of the things in there. So, for instance, you can play the scale upwards or ascending, but playing every second note on the string first and then the first note. Something like this. Okay? Or take the same A minor pentatonic, play it backwards, but ascending on each string. Okay? Try stuff like that. It will open you up because you will start hearing different melodies inside the scale box. And keep in mind, I'm not using nothing but the actual first box of the A minor pentatonic now. And I can create many different things using only that one. Okay? Does that make sense? Do you have any comments, any questions?
Awesome.
Okay,
I just say
Juan?
great ideas. Yeah, no comments on YouTube as well. Yeah, great ideas. Let me just show the graphic I said I wanted to show, just in case anybody's not so familiar with this scale. So this is a graphic that I do for the fretboard whenever I need to graphic stuff. So on this kind of graphics I do, the horizontal lines are strings and the vertical lines are frets. That means that this one right here is fret 5, this is fret 8, and this is the low E string and the high E string. So this is how that A minor pentatonic position 1 looks like, which is the one we're talking about. This is just in case you guys are not so familiar with this one. Let me see the chat. Total newbie question, what is meant by box in this context? That's a great question, Blair. So I feel that can have two answers. It depends on who you're asking. For instance, for me, it can refer to seeing like a fragment of the scale, like literally a rectangle on the fretboard. For instance, this box right here can be these 4 notes, which is a pattern that you can see repeated all over the fretboard depending on the position you're at. So, right? Where else? Like you can see the same fingering pattern being repeated all over the fretboard. That's one thing that could be thought with the word box. Or another one is just taking a look at the whole position. That's what I call position, but that can be called box as well, which is just finding the scale on a specific part of the fretboard. Victor, what would you answer on box?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I might have used a slightly wrong terminology, but yeah, as Juan said, depends on who you're asking. Some people call the positions boxes, but yeah, I agree with Juan. It's better if you take smaller portions of the scale and look at them as boxes. Other than that, what I meant was the first position of the A minor pentatonic scale. Sorry for the confusion. So the first position is, I'm sure you all know this one, right? That's what I meant.
Yeah, probably. Just in case anyone's not so familiar with that term position, that means that, as we said before, a scale has a set of notes. In this case, it has 5 notes. So A, C, D, E, and G. In this specific case. So what a position means is that you'll find that specific set of notes on just a single region of the fretboard. As you could see, I didn't move from here, right? We can find the same notes here. The fingering will look different, but I'm playing the same set of notes. As you can see, it sounds very similar. Or I can find the same scale here, right? Same set of notes. I can go into every place of the fretboard, and find that set of notes. That's what a position means. Like, where are you standing on the fretboard? Okay?
Yes.
Hope that's clear. Let us know, guys, if there are any further questions there. But yeah, moving on with that idea from Victor, I feel that's a great way of switching the way you visualize the scales and practice them. It's very common to practice them just going from one note to the next one. And it sounds this way. But you get a very cool sound if you go like the other way around, if you go up. So instead of, if you do, right, instead of doing frets 5 to 8, and then 5 to 7, and then 5 to 7, and so on. If you do 8 to 5, and then 7 to 5, you get this sound. And the other way around as well. You can build really cool ideas with that sound. So that's just a very cool twist. That's very simple to, I feel, understand and practice, but really changes the way your melodies sound. So I think that's a great point. And in case you guys are already practicing some other positions of the scale, I would encourage you to take every principle we're talking here and take that to every position. So for instance, taking that to position 2, to position 3, and so on. You'll discover all of this stuff all over the fretboard. Okay, that's just in case you're already like practicing more positions, but don't feel rushed if you're not there on your process yet. With that in mind, Victor mentioned something very, very interesting as well, and it's something that I call articulation, or that people also call embellishments, which is basically how you approach a sound and maybe tweak it a little bit so it sounds a little different. Because it's different to play, for example, this note right here. It's different to just pick it like that than to maybe get there with a slide. That's a slide up. You can also do a slide down. Right? It sounds just very different to get to a specific note from a certain way to another. Or maybe if you're connecting two different notes, it's different to pick them, both of them with your right hand, than to maybe just do hammer-ons and pull-ups. Right? That sounds very different than. So articulation is also a fun way to explore the sound of your notes. I would encourage you guys to maybe, with these principles we're talking about on how to build melodies and phrases, also maybe pick one specific articulation and start to play and exaggerate with it. For example, if you want to practice sliding, try to use slides as your main resource on your improvs. So right, I'm obviously exaggerating. Basically every note I did was a slide, but The point being, try to really get the juice out of any articulation you're studying. That can be with a slide, that can be applied to bends as well, so maybe try exaggerating using bends. Right? Try to just get the juice out of every technique you're exploring, whether it's a slide, a bend, a vibrato. That's so you start to get familiar with every technique. Down the road, you'll start to maybe be more intuitive because you're already interiorizing how that specific technique or articulation sounds. But initially, my suggestion is just try to really exaggerate and improvise with it so you start to recognize how it sounds and how to use it. Hope that's making sense. Let us know if there are any comments there. Also, there was something that Frank left on the chat. It says, if you're playing in an A progression of A, D, E, does a player stay only on the A scale or follow to the next chord? The answer is both. It depends on what you want to do. Yeah, that's something I want to expand later on the class, which is a technique called chord chasing. I'll get there. Maybe, Victor, do you have like a quick answer to that?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, Frank. And yes, the answer is yes and no in the same time, because sometimes if you just follow the chords with their respective pentatonic scales, you will hit a note that is not a part of the previous pentatonic scale. What I mean by this is the following. In the A minor pentatonic, I have A, C, D, E, and G, and that's it. Now in the D minor, when the D chord comes, if I play this scale, there is actually one note here that doesn't sound right, and that's the F note, because the F note in an A minor, in an A context, sounds too dark. Okay? Even though the chord here is a D chord, you can, I would much rather use an F sharp note in there, and that's another thing that we're gonna talk about is other scales, other scales that are not the pentatonic scale that you can use in a blues context. But I would much rather use that note because the chord is actually a D major, and the D major chord has an F sharp note, and if you throw in this F note, it contradicts the F sharp and it creates a dissonant like this. Okay? So yeah, you can use that always as a passing note, nothing wrong with that, but it won't sound very old school blues like. It will sound more modern, more even fusion. For instance, now I'm sliding from F to F sharp, but that's actually a very bluesy thing to do in a way, because what I'm doing is sliding up from the minor third of D to the major third of D. Okay? Just as much as I can do that over an A chord. Okay, so A, C up to C sharp with a hammer on. Okay? Do you understand what I mean, Frank? And everybody, actually. Okay.
Awesome. Before moving any further into theory and more technical stuff, I just wanted to also say what comes to your mind, guys, when you think of blues playing. For instance, for me, I was having a conversation with Blair earlier today about blues, and we said blues is very expressive. Like, you can really get into the highest highs and the lowest lows when playing blues, and you can communicate that with your guitar. So I would say, first, what do you think of when you think of this kind of playing? Then maybe try to do a list or just try to break down the stuff you can identify from this style. For example, being very guitar-y technical, I would say for me, when I think of B.B. King, for instance, I think of very aggressive right hand, either picking or finger picking. Right, I was being very exaggerated with my strength here. We can play with dynamics here. Look, I'm gonna play with being very soft over here versus being more hard on my right hand. that's one thing that can come to my mind, dynamics on your right hand. Another one is, I think of this a lot when I try to be bluesy, and it's long notes, like just trying to just let a note ring out and vibrate it. I don't know why, I just think, at least from the little I know from B.B. King, when I think of him, I think of long notes being vibrated. That kind of stuff. Right? So maybe try to do a list of aspects you can think of when you think of this kind of playing. Obviously, that's a very broad conversation because you can take a look at a lot of guitar players and all of them will do different things. But that's just not only to be able to analyze and break it down, but also to develop your own criteria on what's the stuff that you like and want to incorporate to your playing. For instance, again, for me, that can be one thing. Long notes, maybe repeating some of the notes I'm playing. Another one for me personally is double stops. Right, so that kind of stuff. Like try to break it down and try to imitate on your own terms what you can identify from those players. What other ideas, like very stylistic, do you have, Victor?
What I would add when it comes to how you approach your picking and your fretting is also how you approach your tone, your guitar sound. Because when we're talking about the blues, you don't want to go too much effect oriented in this with a lot of distortion and delays and stuff like that. Because if I play this lick, for instance, with too much of a delay and distortion, it sounds nice, but it sounds way more modern, more not really blues-like and not so old school as I said before. But if you approach it with a little bit of overdrive and then try to get the sound out of your guitar and the amp themselves, out of how you attack the string and stuff like that, it will sound much bluesier. Because I can play this same lick, for instance, like this. I can also play like this. I can roll the tone control down. I can play the same lick twice. Okay? And that's how I add character to the playing. So that's also something to think about.
Yep, tone is a huge factor as well. Like not only the notes you're playing, but how are they being presented, I think is key. Also, I mentioned dynamics on your right hand because I feel when playing with overdrive or distortion, the guitar is very reactive to that. So look, right now, the only distortion I have is from my amp. So that's like a very analog, let's say, distortion. Look, if I go really gentle with my right hand, the note almost sounds clean. But if I start to attack it harder, it kind of roars. Especially if you add vibrato to the mix, it extends the sustain of your note, so you get a more aggressive note, right? So look, it's different to play a phrase like this than, right? So also play around with your dynamics on your right hand if you have distortion. That will change the whole thing. And that has a lot to do with what Victor mentioned on play around with your pickups, like try just different possibilities. You yourself explore your own instrument because every guitar is extremely different. Also play around with your volume knobs. Look, on this one, I'm gonna turn my volume down. Almost clean. Even if I go a little hard on my right hand, doesn't sound as aggressive as if I turn it all the way up. Right, so also play around with those dynamics, both over here and with the controls that you have over here. There are a lot of possibilities to explore there, so just try around. And also I would just encourage you guys to literally just play around with the knobs, like be very curious and playful about what does this little thing do? What happens if I turn it all the way down? Play, okay, and if I turn it all the way up? Okay, there's this difference. And be very just playful and curious. You'll start to recognize how every little tweak you do on your tone affects the whole sound of the guitar. So yeah, that's just an invitation to explore tone. And again, listen to the people that you like and try to identify what's their tone. Is it bright? Is it dark? Is it very distorted? Or not so much? How hard or soft are they playing? All of these factors are to take into consideration as well, like beyond just the scales and the notes we're playing. Those are some ideas. With that in mind, guys, I just wanted to make a little pause just to say welcome to the GuitarZoom Academy. In case you are digging this kind of conversations we're having, I'll leave you guys the link over here if you want to take a further look into this. How would you describe the Academy, Victor?
I would describe what we do over there looks something like this, but much more of it, and much more personalized for every student, and much more often than what we do over here, okay? So yeah, you can click on that link after we are done with this session today and just book your first call with us, and then we can talk about your further steps if you're interested, okay? Also for the people watching us on YouTube, here it is one more time in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, I just left it there as well.
Okay.
Awesome. What other ideas do you have on blues soloing, Victor?
Yeah, next thing I want to talk about is scales. So the minor pentatonic scale is usually the go-to scale that we're thinking about when talking about the blues. But it is not the only go-to scale. There are few different elements that are very important when playing the blues, okay? And you cannot be a good blues player if you disregard some of them, okay? First thing is that the blues is a style of music that does not follow the typical minor or major realm, okay? Mixture of minor and major is something that is very characteristic for the blues as a musical style, okay? So, if you're in the key of A, you can either play the A minor pentatonic or the A major pentatonic or mix both, okay? Here we go. I'm gonna record a short loop of only an A bass line and I'm gonna improvise on top of that, okay? Can you hear that? Okay. Okay. Now we have that backing track. Now, what I can do on top of this is I can play an A minor scale, pentatonic. Or I can play an A major pentatonic. Now let me stop this for a second. You can easily access the A major pentatonic if you think of the relative minor, because the minor pentatonic position, as we said, is a very simple one to play, right? Everything starts on the same fret for the first position, okay? So, what would be the relative minor pentatonic of A major is if you go 3 frets backwards. And if I start a pentatonic scale here, this is an F sharp equals A major, okay? That means that they share the same, they have the same notes. F sharp minor pentatonic has the notes F sharp, A, B, C sharp, E, and F sharp. A major has A, B, C sharp, E, F sharp, A. So same notes, that's why they are relative scales. It is only a matter of where you are landing at the end, okay? Where do you want to resolve? Actually, that comes from the root chord, okay? What's in the background? What's in the backing track? What is your band playing? What is your bass player playing? Whatever, right? So, if I play this scale over an A chord vamp, such as the one I recorded, it's actually an A major pentatonic now, okay? Let's give it a try. much different than in its sonic landscape than this. Okay? Now, another way to look at this is, okay, if you are studying the positions of the pentatonic scale, the 5 different positions, the second position of the pentatonic scale, of the minor pentatonic, excuse me, is actually the relative major. So if this is my A minor, and this is the second position of the A minor, okay? This same position, which is second in minor, is actually a C major pentatonic. Okay? Let me know if somebody doesn't understand what I'm talking about, and I will explain it more in depth, okay? Okay, I'm gonna go on then. If you have a question, please let me know. So anyway, here's that position. This is C major, okay? Okay, Blair, here we go. If you take the school book rule, goes like this. If you start the major scale on the 6th step and play the same set of notes, that's how you access the minor scale, the relative minor. Because if I take the C major scale, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and if I start it on the A note, now I'm gonna have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And that's an A minor scale. They have the same notes, but they're starting on a different one. So what was the first note in the major scale is now the third note in the minor scale, A, B, C, okay? Now, if I flip it and look at it the other way around, that means that if I start the minor scale on its third step, that's how I'm accessing the relative major scale of that minor scale, okay? So this same rule applies for pentatonic scales. If A minor equals C major in scales, it is the same for diatonic scales and for pentatonic scales, okay? Because take a look at this. The A minor pentatonic has A, C, D, E, G. The C major pentatonic has C, D, E, G, A, and C. Okay? Who is owner? Whose nickname in Zoom is owner? What's your name? I'm sorry. I cannot hear you. You're still muted. Talk about the academy and what we do over there, okay? If you're interested in learning more. Okay, let's go on. So, just as A minor and C major are relative scales, in the same way, F sharp minor and A major are relative scales, okay? So that's why on top of an A blues, I can use an F sharp minor pentatonic, because that's actually an A major pentatonic here. Okay? Let's go again. A minor. Now I'm gonna play the same lick here in F sharp minor. Okay? And it sounds way more cheerful and more upbeat, so to say. Okay? Now, what I did now was playing either minor or major. Now I'm gonna mix them both. And the way I'm gonna do that is not by playing all of the notes of both scales. I'm just gonna take the most important notes and the first most important note is the third, okay? The third of the scale or the third of the chord. In A minor, if you take a look at the chord, this C note is what's making that chord a minor chord. Now in A major, the C sharp note is the third of the chord, and this is what's making the chord a major chord. Now, if I jump from this minor third up to the major third of the chord, that's the first step for mixing minor and major in the blues, okay? Let's play a lick like that. I can do it by hammering on or by bending. Or I can do that by sliding. Okay? Now, there are many different things you can do for mixing minor and major as well. You don't only have to stick with the third of the chord. You can also do stuff like this. Why? Because this F sharp note is present in the A major pentatonic, but the G note is not. Now the G note is present in the A minor pentatonic and not in the major. So if I slide up from F sharp to A, or bend from F sharp to A, this is again mixing minor and major. Okay? Frank says, when you're playing the A major, are you still using position 1 as you did in the A minor? Well, you can say that, yes, because what I did was I used this position, the first position of the F sharp minor, okay? So yes, I'm thinking A major, but I'm playing in the position for an F sharp minor, okay? You can also do that somewhere up here. For instance, if you take these kinds of licks are very common for A major phrasing. Please note that I'm using F sharp minor as a scale, as a position, but I'm always landing on the A note. I'm always resolving back to A. Okay? And just to wrap up this scale section that I started, aside from the minor and the major pentatonic scale and mixing both of them, another very important thing is throwing in the blue note, because the blues scale is the same scale as the minor pentatonic with one extra note in there, and that is this note. And that's called the blue note, the one that sits between the D and the E note in this case, or the fourth and the fifth of the scale. So okay, so I can always use that in my licks. Okay, and it sounds very, very bluesy. Okay, Juan?
Yep, great points. Look, I just wanted to expand a little bit on what you mentioned on the major and the minor scales being the same thing. Look, these are the notes of the C major scale. I know we haven't talked really too much about the major scale as a whole, but I just wrote the notes over here. So right here we got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, right? Which sounds like this. That's the sound of the C major scale. Now, the minor scale is exactly the same thing if you grab this, but flip it around a little bit. So instead of doing the same thing starting from C, you can start from A. So that's the difference between the major and the minor scale. They can be the same thing, or maybe let's say not the difference between them, but that's the concept of relative keys. So it's grabbing the same set of notes but playing them on a different context. So the one on top is the C major scale and the one below is the A minor scale. Now, as you could see from what Victor said, the key number right here is number 6, right? So if we're starting on C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that 6 is gonna be A. That's the same thing as the relative minor, which is A minor. So that's the very same principle we were applying for the pentatonic. The pentatonic scale is the same thing, except it lacks these two notes. It lacks F and B. So look, on top I have, no, below I have the A minor pentatonic scale. And below, sorry, on top I got the C major scale. C major pentatonic, sorry. Which are the same set of notes, just starting on a different place. So that's why we were using both the minor and the major pentatonic as equivalents. We can use them on the same context, which is what Victor was doing, just transposed to this key of A major or minor. But yeah, hope that was useful in case there were any questions lingering on that end about relative keys. That's what that means. Same set of notes, different standpoint. With that in mind, I also wanted to touch on something called chord chasing, which had something to do with a question that was asked before by Frank about, do we stay on the same scale when improvising, or should we shift to other scales or other notes? So here's an idea. Maybe guys, you have heard about something called the 12-bar blues. Have you? If so, please let us know. Awesome. So that's basically a chord progression or a structure that has 12 measures. And at that 12 measures, we follow a specific chord progression, which, for example, in this case, is A major for 4 bars, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, then D major for 2 bars, A major again for 2, E for 1 bar, D for 1 bar, A for 1, and E again. And it starts over. So it's kind of a cycle, a never-ending cycle, right? It gets you back on top to keep on improvising. So I wanted to mention that because the chords are changing, right? So an idea that we can take into our improvisations is that we can highlight those root notes from this progression as the progression goes. For instance, all of these roots are actually on the A minor pentatonic. Here's A from A, here's D from the D chord, and here's E. And you can find them on different places on the same position. Okay, those are all the instances where I have A, D, and E on that position. With that in mind, check this out. I'm gonna improvise a little bit, but every time I get to that specific chord, I will play that root. So here it starts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's D, A, E, D, A, E. Right? It was somehow hearable or audible, this chord progression that I was playing underneath, like that whole 12-bar blues. Although I was playing melodies, as long as I can highlight notes of the progression or of the specific chord I'm over with, the progression is gonna be noticeable. So that's the technique that over here we call chord chasing. It's just playing notes from the chord you're playing on the progression. For now, I would invite you guys to start playing just the roots. 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, D, 3, 4, 2, 2, A again, 2, E, D, A, and E. Once you're very comfortable there, that will take a little bit of time to like getting used to where the roots are and actually playing them in time. But once you can do that, I would start to encourage you to fill up those spaces that we're leaving. right? I'm just trying to improvise melodies. So yeah, that's an idea for starters that I have on chord chasing. Try to highlight the roots. They are on that pentatonic. Any other ideas with that, Victor?
Yes, and then next step would be to think about other chord notes to chase, not only the root of the next chord, but also any chord note. And you don't have to be too much into music theory to be able to do this. Because if you just take a look at the shape of the chord, let's say we are still in the key of A, the second chord is D. You can land on any of the notes that are within the shape of the D chord, okay? It could be any of these notes. But also because it's usually a D7 dominant chord, you can also land on this one, or you can take another shape, for instance, such as this one, land on any of these notes, or any place here, or up here, or whatever. And let me give you an example. For instance, I'm gonna start with an A. You see how for the whole 2 bars, while the D chord is sort of playing in the background, even though I am playing by myself without a backing track here, you could hear the D chord being formed by all of these notes that I emphasized, okay? Because I'm sort of arpeggiating the D chord. I'm playing all of the chord notes of that D major 7, sorry, D dominant 7, okay? And then when the E chord comes, for instance, okay, what I emphasized here was an arpeggio of an E dominant chord, okay?
Yep, also
Yes, by
expanding
the way,
on that.
what Blair said, yes, Robert Johnson did that. And also, not only that, he threw in an extra bar. Sometimes he throws in extra beats in the bar because he played by himself. He could do whatever he feels like, right? There is nobody he cannot make a mistake like that. For instance, if you take that song, what was the name of that song? Traveling Riverside Blues. Okay, it's in open A, I think, whatever. But anyway, it's an A major 12 bar. But what he does in the second verse is, okay, there are 5 beats on the first chord. So gonna stay no color by the fountain, crown and gold. Gonna stay no color by the... Okay, so pop 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 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Okay, now he was polite enough to do this when playing by himself. Now John Lee Hooker was not too polite, and he was torturing his band with this, and he said, like, gentlemen, the bars are done when I say they are, not after the 12th bar. Okay, anyway, Juan.
Yeah, no, first I just had an idea that I think it's very important to mention, and it is that, at least for me, I'm a jazz player. Like I studied a lot of jazz, so that's like on my vocabulary as well. I think jazz and blues as well are more like an attitude towards playing than anything else. For me, they're not even music genres, just an attitude of approaching your instrument. So with that in mind, and with what you just said on Robert Johnson, he did whatever he wanted. I think it comes down to that. So on this lesson, we have talked about a lot of very technical stuff and maybe some ideas to try out. But at the end of the day, try to just have your personality here. Like, do whatever you want. Blues, jazz, every African American musical tradition is very punk on its DNA. Like, it's just trying to put yourself out there and express whatever you're feeling. So yeah, try to be careless and reckless with the stuff you're trying on your guitar. That will make it sound very alive, okay? And that will make it sounds like you as well. So I think that's an important part of this conversation as well. And it's, yeah, we can think of the scales and we can think of more tools to add to our repertoire, but at the end of the day, it's what voice are you bringing to your instrument and how are you getting it out there, which the reflection comes to. With that said, changing topics to, again, chord chasing. If you're maybe more advanced on your music theory and you already started exploring this 12-bar blues with the root notes, it could be a good idea to start exploring other notes as of the triad or even the seventh chord, as Victor was saying. So for instance, here's an attempt of that, but not landing on the root notes, but the thirds. The third of every chord has the special characteristic of making it obvious that we're playing that specific chord. So look, 2, 3, 4. So I was landing mainly on the thirds, and the chord progression was kind of out there. It was like very evident that I was playing every chord. So going to your roots, going to your thirds, your fifths, even your sevenths, all of these notes will make it very obvious that you're playing that specific chord. The disclaimer is, try that out only if your music theory you feel is already at that level of understanding triads and seven chords. If not, don't dive deeper into that because you'll get overwhelmed pretty easily. Okay, so first start building those foundations up. That's just in case you're already there on your process. With that in mind, guys, that's everything I had planned for this lesson. What about you, Victor? Do you have maybe anything else?
No, I have another one starting in a minute. But anyway, guys, last thing I want to say is learn other people's licks as well, okay? And make them your own later. Because you cannot just go and invent your own language from scratch, okay? So always, I wouldn't say learn whole solos of other guitar players, but take a lick that you really like from that solo, learn that, transcribe it, try to move it in different keys, try to put different rhythmical values to the notes, try to play it in different positions, and that's how you make it your own later, okay? Okay. I gotta go. Thank you for joining. And
awesome.
See you next time. And also here's that link again before I leave you. Okay?
Yeah, I was looking
for that. Click on that one, book your call with the Academy, and we'll talk some more.
Yep.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Victor.